I wanted to say a few words about the burial in the land of Israel. For our many sins, since the time of exile, the majority of Jewish people generally lived outside the land of Israel, and there were times when very few Jews were able to live in the land of Israel. Of course, in those times there were very few people in general. The land of Israel used to, for longest periods of time, be almost completely empty. But at any rate, when the Jews were in exile, a lot of times they preferred that, at least if it's possible, that their body will be buried in the land of Israel. We find that a number of great rabbis were brought to the burial of the land of Israel, of course. For instance, Rambam, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, who died in Egypt. He lived in many various places. He had to run away from persecution in various countries where he lived, but he ended up becoming very important in the court of the king of Egypt at the time, Saladin, and he was a doctor there, was probably the greatest doctor of his time, and the Arab poets used to compose poems about him, Maimonides. So when he died in Egypt, they brought his body and buried it in the land of Israel. And there are a few other people who were Zoche, who had the merit to be buried in the land of Israel. So one might assume that this is based on what is written in our weekly reading, right? Our Parsha says that Yakov, specifically asked Yosef to swear that he'll bury him in the land of Israel. By the way, why would he ask for an oath? Couldn't he just trust Yosef? One possibility is that Yosef himself might not be able to do it for various reasons. For instance, Paro might want to have a holy man like Yakov be buried in Egypt. In a sense, it was like a slap in the face. You know, you lived here when there was hunger in the Holy Land, and now, after he dies, you want to bring him outside of Egypt to be buried in Eretz Canaan, right? It didn't look good necessarily for Egyptians. Maybe they would refuse, but once Yosef swears, there's a much greater possibility that he will be able to persuade Paro that he took an oath. He cannot violate the oath. The non-Jews also in those times were very serious about the oaths that they took. And that's how Yosef would be able to persuade Paro, the Egyptian king, to allow him to take the body of, to fulfill the last will of the deceased, to take the body of Yakov and bury it in Israel. Whatever the case may be, the story seems to imply that it's very important to be buried in Israel. And by the way, Yosef, who, when he died already, apparently could not instruct the Jewish people who were still surviving to bring his body immediately to the Holy Land. So at the very least, he said that in the future, when God will save you, you should take my body with you and bring it to rest in the Holy Land. So one might assume that that's the base of the idea of being buried in Israel. And in fact, that's how Maimonides himself writes, that the righteous people, based on these types of verses, prefer to be buried in Israel if possible. What's really interesting is that in the Jerusalem Talmud, what's called, it's the Talmud of Eretz Yisrael, a dispute whether it's ideal to be buried in the land of Israel. It brings two opinions. That one rabbi, when he saw that the corpses were brought from Babylonia to be buried in the land of Israel, he said, "You came and you made my land unclean." It's a verse. He was quoting a verse from Yechezkel. You basically polluted my land. Because, of course, the dead body, according to the Torah law, creates ritual pollution. The more dead bodies are buried in the land of Israel, the more places that people wouldn't be able to enter and then go to the temple, or a Kohen cannot enter those areas, or Truma, there's certain foods that Kohanim eat, priests eat, cannot pass in those roads where there are dead bodies buried. So in a way, what are you accomplishing? You're bringing dead bodies from Babylonia, just making our land more unclean. But a different rabbi said, no, look, these people, they really love the land of Israel, that's why they're doing it. And apparently Rambam decided to follow that opinion, and that's what is still customary today. Not all rabbis, by the way, and certainly regular people, not all of them ask to be buried in the land of Israel. There are plenty of people who are buried here in the United States where I live and in other countries where Jews live, even though it's not so expensive today. Today it's a lot easier to get buried in the land of Israel, but it doesn't mean that everybody asks for it. There are certain rabbis who say that for an average person it's not really something to ask for. One thing is a person who is on a very high level, for them, ideally, like Yakov, is to be buried in the land of Israel. But for an average person, it's not clear if this is ideal. But a lot of people still do it. So a lot of people, even regular average people, ask to be buried in the land of Israel, and this way show the love of the land, towards which we of course pray 3 times a day. I would say that maybe for a person who really wanted to live in the land of Israel all his life or her life, and then it just didn't work out for various reasons, but they really did want it, then maybe it's an ideal that at least if they weren't zoche, if they didn't merit to live there, they would at least be buried there. But for a person who, honestly speaking, lived in Galut like everybody else lives in Galut, in theory we all believe that one day the Jewish people will be gathered in the land of Israel. But they weren't particularly interested, let's just say. They weren't really striving to move to the land of Israel as of right now. So then why ask the body to be buried in the land of Israel? It's in a way like a hypocrisy of sorts. Either you want to live in the land of Israel, it's a great mitzvah certainly, then do it now, do it while you're alive. If a person already is dead and then they say, okay, so bring my body to the land of Israel, it sounds like a hypocrisy. But the person who really wanted, but there are various reasons why certain rabbis, for instance, stay outside the land of Israel. They may be needed, for instance, by their congregation. All kinds of situations exist. I mean, in most of our history, most of the rabbis stayed outside the land of Israel, even though it was possible. It was a lot harder than today, but it was possible to move. And still, very few actually did move, because there are always all kinds of reasons why a person's destiny might be. I mean, this is part of the exile. This is, in fact, it's Hashem who sent us to exile. It's the Torah who tells us that we'll be in exile for a long time, right? So it wasn't like personal choice that people just decided, okay, we're going into exile. We wanted to stay in the land of Israel originally, but we were kicked out of there. And some people, very righteous people, tried to move to the land of Israel against all odds throughout history. Rambam, for instance. Rambam was one of the great proponents of living in the land of Israel and trying to settle there. When he came, there was very few people there altogether, and very few Jews and very few people altogether. This was about 700 something years ago. He says that Yehuda is the most destroyed, the more holy, the more destroyed. That's what he found, and he wrote letters to his son about it. The more holy the place, the more it's destroyed. Like the south, Yehuda is the most destroyed. In the north, there is a little bit of life. So that's how it used to be for the longest period of time. It's only about maybe 500 years ago already there were quite large congregations, especially in the north, in the times of Rabbi Yosef Karo, the author of Shulchan Aruch. There were much larger congregations already. And then came in the Hasidim, and then the students of Vilna Gaon almost immediately afterwards. It was like 200 or so years ago. There was a large movement of a lot of Jews towards the land of Israel, and then more and more. But today, of course, it's not that difficult, but it's not required that every Jew will go to the land of Israel until the times of Mashiach. We don't have to all move. If a person moves, he fulfills a great mitzvah, but it's not an obligatory mitzvah that everybody should gather until there is some clear sign that the redemption is happening. So it's a step-by-step process, and those who want to move to the land of Israel, then, certainly if they weren't able to for various reasons, at least they want to send their body to the land of Israel. It makes a lot of sense. But if a person is not on that level, probably they should be buried outside the land of Israel and not bring more tumah, more uncleanliness to the Holy Land, in my humble opinion. And on this I'm going to end for today. And if you like this video, please press like and please subscribe to our channel.